I'm tired of the divisiveness and the animosity that is being stoked and inflamed by our media. And I can't just turn a blind eye to it and cover my ears. I would like to, and I try to, but when people start coming to me and using mean words and saying mean things, and it starts to get close to home, I think it's important to speak up and to say something about it. I'd like to really, the core of the message that I want to put out right now is one of unity and peace. And I want to start out by saying that whether you're a conservative or a liberal, whether you're an anarchist or a communist, whatever your ideology or political leanings may be, you have a place here. You're welcome in this community. I identify myself as a human being and as a creature of God, of the sun, of the universe. And because I identify myself that way, I don't see other people as being different from me. I see them as being members of the same creative project that is the human race. And so, whether you're Christian, Muslim, Jew, you all have a place here. You're all welcome here. And I love you all. I hold you all in the same status in my heart because of how I see myself as a member of the same thing that I see you as being a part of. I think a lot of problems arise when our sense of identity is abased below that. And it's gone way, way, way below that. I mean, there used to be a time when we identified with our country, with our nationality, which compared to where we are now would be amazing if we could go back to that. But now it's just gone down so many levels, down to skin color, or definitely religious ideas and political ideas. Our sense of identity has become so abased that divisiveness is the inevitable outcome. The only people pushing you to identify with abased things are people who want to control you and want to foster you to join their team and turn you into a foot soldier for their cause. But I would encourage you to try to elevate yourself, to try to think about yourself first as a human being or as a creature of the divine. I have a lot of tolerance and love in my heart, but I've had to draw a line recently. And where I've decided to draw that line is with bullies. And I mean bullies, people who bully me or people who bully others. I don't tolerate that anymore. Those people don't have a place here. No matter what your political leaning is, if you feel that it's your place to tell me who I can love and who I should hate and what I should believe and what my political opinion should be, then you are a bully in my mind. If you take the words freedom of speech to mean Nazi and white supremacist, that's on you. That is something that is in your mind. I will take responsibility for my words, but I will not take responsibility for the way that you interpret them. That is completely on you. Our media has provided such a bad intellectual toolkit for people that, like I said, it's almost like instead of informing us and giving us facts and giving us information, they've really only presented us with ways in which to identify people they want you to hate. It's toxic, and it's leading, it's definitely a big part of the divisiveness that we're seeing, especially since the voices that are calling for these toxic, that are promoting these toxic ideas, are silencing voices like mine whom want to fight against the lies and shine some truth on it. So as you hear my words, if you are filling in the gaps with words like Nazi, fascist, alt-right, proud boy, and latest being terrorist, if you are seeing those words and identifying them with my position, I call that narradoping, which is getting high on a narrative that is turning you into a narradope, into someone who is unable to think for themselves and look at information and interpret it without a contaminated lens, and instead viewing it entirely through a program that has been instilled in your mind. Television programming is programming a lot of people. And it's up to us to speak up and dispel people from this hypnosis. If we just remain silent, there is nothing that's fighting back. And so that's one of the main reasons I'm standing up right now and speaking up. I can't just be idle and let this go by without taking some sort of action. I did something similar almost 5 years ago, and I posted a blog post about it where I cautioned people that if you silence people, if you don't let people speak their mind, you will only breed violence. And largely that's a lot of what we've seen, in my opinion. What we've seen the last 5 years is an increase in violence, not because of speech, but because people who have concerns, people who have problems and worries in this world, are not really being given a platform. You may think so, you may think they are, but they really aren't. Voices are not being heard right now. There's a lot of hurt and there's a lot of suffering going on right now in the world, and most of it is being ignored. And I'm not just talking about the pain that conservatives are feeling. I'm talking about pain all across the board. There's been a lot of suffering having to do with the quarantines, the lockdowns, and I don't hear those voices. And yeah, there are a lot of instances of pain that are being given a voice, but rest assured, that pain is being used. It's not being addressed. And what I mean by used is used toward political ends. The suffering continues. And when politicians are able to leverage your suffering for their benefit, there is no motivation for them to do anything about it other than help it persist. It's cruel. It's very cruel, and it frightens me to see that now at an institutional level we are wanting to codify the shutting down of speech. And so I've decided to dedicate my Facebook page and my Twitter page to nothing but advocating for freedom of speech. I don't care whether you voted for Trump or whether you voted for Biden. You have a place here. And I'm not going to let you tell me otherwise. I'm not going to let you tell me what I should think about people who voted for one side or the other. I will tell you about my politics in this video and I will tell you about my belief system too, because I don't want you to take the words that I'm saying now and use this terrible intellectual toolkit that our education system and our news and media system has implanted in your brain to translate my words to mean something they're not. So I'm going to be more transparent about who I am in this video than I have been in the past. I wish I didn't have to make this so personal, because it really should be irrelevant. I provide a service and I provide a product that I really just want to stand on their own two feet, and I don't want them to be associated, or for you to feel like just because you read my content or consume my content or my products that you are somehow endorsing a particular viewpoint. You shouldn't have to feel that way. I don't want Jeff Bezos to tell me who he voted for, I don't need to know that information. But I will give you some insight as to how I think and how I view things, so that you don't have to interpret them incorrectly. So there are two kinds of bullies who I'm stripping away from my life, and I would suggest, just for your own mental health, do the same. There are those who I've already mentioned who seem to want to interpret my words as meaning something they don't mean, to take a word like conservative or a word like freedom, and put a fascist spin on it, or call me a Nazi or a white supremacist. That kind of bullying I'm stripping away from my life. But there's also another kind of bullying that has been going on, which is people whom not only expect you to have tolerance and welcome them with open arms, but expect you to jump on their bandwagon and advocate, become an advocate for their cause. That is also a kind of bully. I have a friend who was working at a Christian college, and the students didn't feel that the mission statement in the college properly advocated for some of the groups that were in the student body. And that would be almost like the college saying, well, you can't be a student unless you advocate for Jesus Christ. You see how that would be kind of a bully and kind of not very tolerant. We are confusing being open and being welcoming and being loving and being tolerant of others with somehow you're not doing that unless you're advocating for the cause that they want you to advocate for. That is a form of bullying also. It's a form of emotional manipulation and bullying, and I will not tolerate it. The line that I've put in the sand is that I will not be bullied into thinking or feeling or believing what you want me to, or be bullied into silence. So if anybody tells me you should be quiet or you should not have freedom to speak, that is a kind of bully. The only people who tape the mouth of other people are abusers, kidnappers, tyrants, criminals. I have never seen a good person or a good government or a good society that wanted to shut people up. There's that famous saying, the pen is mightier than the sword, which is true. The pen can cause so much change and even lead to violence. But without the pen, all you have is the sword. You know, we wouldn't really have a civilization if we didn't have language, if we didn't have the ability to combat our ideas with words. Anybody who studies history knows this. The journey from ape to civilized human beings has been a journey of language increasing in complexity and our ability to communicate to become expanded, and violence diminishing over time. You may not think it based on how the news presents things to you, but if you look at the numbers, violence is in the decline, dramatically in the decline. And I attribute that to language, to speech, and to systems and methods that have made speech easier and more far-reaching. What perhaps has happened is that our speech has become so powerful that those who would seek to hide the truth now feel threatened by that speech. And they would like to silence it as much as possible. This is why you find that prominent people get blocked or taken down. But if you're someone like me who doesn't have that much of a reach, is allowed to say the things that I've been saying in this video so far. I know some of you disagree and think that, well, it's not that they're silencing truth, they're silencing lies. And anybody who tells you they have the truth figured out is themselves an ideologue, because the truth is not something that you can find. The truth is something that you search, that you're constantly looking for. And at least that's my belief, and that's why I identify myself as a seeker. I don't really have a particular religious ideology that I subscribe to, but I study all of them. I've read the Bible, the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita. I've read the Book of Mormon. I've read many of the Baha'i scriptures. I love Hindu philosophy and tradition, and have almost a daily love affair with yoga. You know, if I were to pick a favorite lately, it's the Tao Te Ching, which was written by a Chinese, as far as we know, a Chinese philosopher. It's one of the oldest written works. I love Greek mythology. I even named one of my kids after a Greek goddess and another child after a Sumerian goddess. And, you know, all of these historical works are like a treasure trove. And if you haven't taken the time to familiarize yourself with them, then I would definitely encourage you to take the time and read up with an open mind and an open heart everything that's out there. There's so much. Lately, of all the things I've read, there's this one phrase that keeps popping up in my mind, and it's from the New Testament. It's from the book of John, that starts out by saying, "In the beginning was the Word." And that keeps popping up and germinating in my mind, almost like that seed. Once that seed was planted, it's just been really insistent on wanting to pop up and show itself. And I think it's because it really aligns very deeply with what's core to my philosophy. Which is, I have this notion of creation and God, or whatever you want to call the creative spirit, as being like the relationship between seed and soil, which is that there is a kind of an intertwined relationship between creator and creation. And so I view every human being as a almost sacred manifestation of the creator. Sometimes I'll even align myself with Egyptian philosophy and think about the sun like the heavenly God, and the rays of being like the Word of God. And so I often sometimes see people, if I'm out on the beach especially, I see people as like packets of sunlight. I see every human being as a unique packet, as an ambassador of the sun. This is, I think, where my beliefs currently lie. So let me tell you a little bit about my politics, because again, I don't want you to be filling in the blanks yourself, and just be open and frank with you about it. I don't feel like my politics are really all that controversial. Maybe that's why it's so easy to share. But I'll go ahead and explain this to you. But first I need to kind of explain how I view what that word politics actually means to me. Most of you are probably familiar with the idea of left versus right. You may have even seen political parties broken up into grids, and having different. You can be over here, over here, over there. This is my understanding and how I view the realm of politics as being a battle between two fundamental ideas. I'm not talking about Democrat or Republican, so just kind of scrap those words out. The two ideas being a centralization and decentralization. So let me kind of explain what that means. As you move toward the left side of the political spectrum, what you find is you get closer and closer and closer to the extremity of that, which would be totalitarianism. And that would be that entire political ethic taken to an extreme where all of the decisions are centered around a single individual, or a tyranny, a tyrant of some kind. Then you can move all the way to the right and you can get another version of that extreme, which you could describe as perhaps anarchy, where things are just sort of subdivided infinitely and there is no cohesion to society at all. The way I visualize this is the tyrant is like a single point, and the political ethic revolves around that single point. As you move further away from tyranny, you introduce a variety of other political ideas and systems, because what you start to introduce as you move away from tyranny is freedom. And as more freedom gets introduced to a system, it bifurcates and it divides up and it breaks up into many branches. Now over here, where you start to begin to see things sort of separate away, that's where you start to see the separation of powers and different institutions that have different authority levels, perhaps at a federal level, which is still centralized, but at least you have a Congress, a Senate, a president, and you have all these different institutions that have different levels of authority, and they sort of help keep each other in check. Move further still, and now you have other powers in place. This is where the United States was a great innovator, in my opinion. It established this idea of federalism, where the federal government had certain oversight responsibilities for the nation, but the individual states got to have a lot of legal authority for the people who lived in that state, thereby creating a kind of competitive landscape between states, so that if one state became sort of tyrannical, people would have the freedom to leave to another state who was treating its citizens better. You could take that further still, and then you introduce county level authority. Further still, you have city level authority and mayors, and how much power do they have over how their city operates. And if you visualize these branches going further still, you reach all the way down to the individual family, and then further still to the individual person. I think a really healthy society is one that looks like a tree bearing beautiful leaves and fruits. Jesus once said, "By their fruits ye shall know them." And the meaning of this is you will know whom, and that whom could be a family, a person, a society, a community. You will know whom is doing things correctly based on the results and the fruits that they produce. And I feel more and more that our society, even though it has the infrastructure to produce this kind of tree-like structure, is looking more and more like a tree that's had all of its branches trimmed off. It's almost like the tree trunk has gotten really greedy and wants to keep all the resource for itself. Now, this may sound like I'm advocating for some sort of communistic, socialistic idea, and I'm not. The analogy here is more having to do with what's important and how we should think about the political infrastructure of society as separate from the cultural and the fruits of society. Notice that when you look at a healthy tree, the trunk itself is providing security because it raises most of the branches far enough from the ground. It raises most of the fruit-bearing branches far enough from the ground to protect them from external threats, right? It digs deep into the soil to give it the strength it needs to hold, to sustain the weight of all of the branches. And this, in my opinion, is the role of the federal government, is what the tree trunk is doing in a tree. It's not to bear the fruits. It's not to even determine where the fruits should grow. It's really there to provide security, safety, and strength, and to tap into natural resource. And then even the branches that stem from that tree trunk, it's only when we get the smaller branches, the really small ones, these are the families, the individuals, that you start to see the emergence of leaves and fruits. And they're placed strategically to tap into the sunlight and capture most of that divine energy so they can manifest themselves to the greatest extent possible. And so my political belief is that there has to be a balance of freedom, an extensive amount of freedom, with a very strong and firm foundation. And I believe we've built the infrastructure for that, but we don't have the political wisdom or the political will to make it happen. I do have, I guess, perhaps a pretty radical idea on how to solve this. But it would involve completely just rewriting our entire tax system, where everything would be backwards to what it is today. Right now, most of our tax money goes to the federal government, goes all the way from the individual to the federal government, most of our taxes. I think it should be backwards. I think all of our, every single tax dollar that we pay should go to our city. And then the cities would have to give a chunk of that to the county, and the counties would give a chunk of that to the state, and the state would give a chunk of that to the federal government, so that the vast majority of the resources are actually being spent in our location. The place where we invest our tax dollars in is the place that we work out of or live out of. And I believe if we did that, you wouldn't have situations like you have today, where the wealthiest places, the places with the highest GDP in our country, are also the places with the highest amount of homelessness. That makes no sense at all. If you were doing things right, in my opinion. It makes sense given how we're doing things now. Now, the argument that I get against that is that, well, then all of your cities would become corrupted. And in my opinion, I would rather a city become corrupted than a federal government become corrupted. Because if the federal government becomes corrupted, then the entire thing breaks. It's a very fragile system when you centralize a lot of power. It's almost like if you were to centralize a power grid for electricity, if that thing were struck by something, or one of the transformers gave out, then the entire country wouldn't have any electricity. So we know this from a practical standpoint, that it's wiser to decentralize things, to decentralize power. But that's kind of where I'm at. I'm a very pro grassroots, pro local, pro do things, instill change in areas that are within your reach. Because I've always believed that if everybody were to help themselves and to help those who are within their arm's reach, then the entire world would be in good hands. But I've been feeling lately that, well, my whole life I've been feeling this way, that we've been doing things backwards. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating to see. But what's scary again is that there may come a day not long from now where I won't even be able to share these words with you, or these ideas, because things have moved so far in this direction, so close to tyranny, that what happens when power centralizes itself is it itself devotes most of its efforts to ensuring that it does not lose that power. And it trims away all of these, any branches that may form through freedom. It cuts them off, it trims them away. And that's what I feel like we're seeing now, is a pruning and I've heard the word cleansing a lot, and I've heard the word list making a lot, which is of course a very scary thing. To be hearing that kind of language used when describing people who have belief systems that align more with my own. However, because you get this bifurcation on the right, where you have some people who choose to go the religion route, some people who choose to go the prepper route, some people who choose to go the commune route, some people who choose to create their own little colonies or their own little tribes or their own little cliques, their own little gangs or whatever. There's really oftentimes very little in common between people on this side of the spectrum, which is why they will never really win politically, because there's no cohesion there. There's a lot of diversity. There's a lot of difference. And there's little desire for political power, because people over here are just happy doing their thing. They've found their way of life, and they're happy living their life how they're living it. But it saddens me to see that we're moving in a direction that would rather shut up all of these different voices, all of these different ideas, all of this diversity. And I don't think I could live with myself if I didn't speak up and share with you how I feel. Um, Honestly, without freedom of speech, I don't think we would be here today. I don't think I would have um, come up with this product line. I don't see what's the value of being an artist or being in the arts if you don't have the freedom to express yourself. So, in my opinion, if we are to see an increase in violence in the coming years, the blame to that rests solely on those wishing to silence speech. Because increasing speech, only reduces violence, in my opinion. It doesn't mean speech can't lead to violence. I mean, we all know quite well how there are many prominent voices in the past whom ended up being so influential with their words that they ended up getting shot, or were so influential with their music that revolutionized an entire generation. Speech is powerful, but it's the only tool we have to civilize ourselves further, to improve ourselves, to help us find the truth, and to seek what is right. So I want a world where everyone is allowed to be themselves, and everyone is allowed to follow the dictates of their own conscience. The proper way to change the world, in my opinion, is not by tearing things down. It's by building things up, or to add to something that is already there that is working well. If we come to a conversation with a desire to add something to it rather than a desire to tear it down, I think that is the proper way, and ultimately the most constructive way, literally, to make the world a better place. But you can't do that, can you? If you're prevented from speaking, if you're prevented from adding what you have to contribute to the conversation. This is why freedom of speech is so important to me. So, if you're here because you want to add to the conversation, not because you want to break or tear something down or destroy something or steal, you're welcome here. And that is what I believe. That is how I feel, and I hope that has made my position clear. Thanks for watching.